This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
And welcome back to another episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. My name is Andrew Simmons, and I am not joined by my co-host Josh this week. I am running a solo episode. He will join me next week for our next interview. Today, I just wanted to have a little talk about productivity. This is something that I've kind of delved really deep into recently. I've been diving into it with people like Thomas Franks, people like Ali Abdaal. If you don't know who those people are, they're really great YouTubers that kind of live in the productivity space, trying to maximize your time spent working so that you can not feel like you're wasting time while you're working. You're getting the most done with your time so that whenever you're not working, you can really relax and you don't have to feel like you're wasting time, if that makes sense. So it's something that I've been really, really thinking about because as a home studio owner, I feel like it's something that we come across a lot. A part of having a home studio is we want to be able to spend time with our family. We want to be able to go travel. We want to be able to go do the things that we want to be able to do, enjoy ourselves, or work whenever we want to work. We want to be able to optimize that time when we're working so that we can do the other things. Like I said, we can do the traveling, the family time. Or some of us have another job and we need to optimize our time for the studio so that we can do our normal day job. And then we can have our family time, and maybe we only get a couple hours in during the day or maybe at night when everybody's asleep to actually do our studio work. Well, we want to really make sure that we're making the most out of those 2 to 3, maybe even just 1 hour a night that we are able to have to really focus on studio work. So like I said, it's something that I've been really focusing on. I've been trying to really optimize my time, not only to save my ears, but also be able to make sure I'm spending time with my family, making sure I'm able to do things like travel to writing sessions and stuff like that, so that the stuff that I need to do physically here, I can make sure that I am optimizing that time. So I'm just going to give, I think I have 4 things here. Yes, 4 things that kind of through listening or just some things that I've started doing that I found super, super helpful for me in optimizing my productivity for getting stuff done and not feeling like I'm overwhelmed with all of the tasks that I have to do. So without further ado, let's get into this with number 1. And that is going to be separate your workspaces. So this is something I accidentally did and I found out that it's a pretty common thing in the world of productivity. So separating my workspace, what does that mean? You can do it the normal way, which is like having a studio separate from your house, or and we don't really have that as people with home studios. Our studio's literally in our house, so we don't have that option, but we have a separate room, generally speaking, for our studio. So we have our living space, maybe our bedroom, and then we're working out of a certain area. Some of us don't even have that. Whenever I was in an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment, there was just a section of our living room in the corner next to the couch that was my studio space. And it was really hard to not turn that space into a bunch of other things. I was really trying to keep that space whatever, holy to studio time or whatever. So physically doing that obviously it's a way that you don't think about. But what I've found and what I've been reading up on is that actually, if we take our computers and we do the things in our bedrooms or in the places where we watch TV or something like that, it's actually hindering us a little bit from staying concentrated, because while we're working, we're distracted. And then while we're trying to relax, maybe by like trying to go to bed or maybe by trying to watch TV or play some video games or something, our brain mentally, because we're so used to also working in that space, is still in work mode. So this is the idea of saying, okay, I'm going to physically designate some space. Now, like I said, not all of us have this option, but whatever space you have available, mentally designate that space for work. So if you're in an apartment like I was, that desk, when you sit at that desk, it's work time. When you're not working, we're not sitting at that desk. Like this studio that I'm in right here, if you were watching on YouTube, you can see that this is my studio space. I don't come in here to do anything unless I am working or making coffee right there. And even then, it's, I have another coffee station out there that I normally make my pour overs at. So it's not necessarily, it's like having a mental separation with a physical limitation. So it's like that door is my physical limitation for my mentality. Whenever I walk in here, it's work time. Whenever I leave here in 30 minutes, because my day's ending at 6:00 today, whenever I leave here, I shut this room down and I close the door, and I do not come back in here unless I'm working later at night and it's time to get back to work. There's also a couple other ways to go about this. So like I said, you have the option like I have where you have a physical space, and then like if you're in an apartment, you can designate a specific desk area that this is the place where you work and you do not do anything else at that place. So then also there is the option of physically removing yourself from the location entirely, like totally different locations. Now, it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. This is not necessarily saying get a physical studio, because that's kind of not what we're doing. But I'm thinking more of like, if you want a place to work, but you don't necessarily want to go like at your studio desk to work on non-studio stuff, but you still want to work on work, like sending emails or responding to clients or working on your business, chasing down leads or, a lot of emailing stuff and budgetary things. But you don't want to do that in your physical studio space. Grab something like I got this iPad recently. It just like it's pretty cool. It connects to this keyboard and you just get like a little iPad with a keyboard. Or if you have a laptop, like I have a mobile studio, my whole studio is connected to my laptop. You can physically remove yourself from your desk and then go to somewhere like a coffee shop, or if you wanted to go sit at like a restaurant or something, somewhere free. Obviously, I'm not saying go pay for a bunch of stuff, but somewhere free, and then go do your quote unquote office work there. So that way you're not feeling like you're having to be businessy in your creative space. That's something that I've also started to do a lot more. I have a specific place at my kitchen table where I sit down with my iPad and I do things like all my typing, all my writing, all my reading, things like that. That feels more businessy to me, rather than coming in here to this studio space and where this is my creative space. This is the place where I work on music. This is the place where I make beats and mix and all of that. And I'm not crossing the I'm emailing a bunch of stuff and working on businessy things with this is my creative space and I'm mixing and making music. So that was a lot right off the top. But that's, the physical side of things. The other half of that is digitally. And I also do this some. So if you don't know, if you're kind of new and you're not sure what we work in, Josh generally works in Ableton or Cubase, and I actually work in Ableton and Pro Tools. Now, the reason that I do this, for a couple different reasons, I started in Pro Tools for mixing. When I started to get into more production stuff, more beat stuff, Pro Tools wasn't really cutting it for what I was trying to do, and it didn't feel really intuitive. So I moved over to Ableton because I knew Ableton from my years of doing live production. So like live backing tracks and things like that. It felt super intuitive for those kind of things. So I just kind of started using it for that. And then what I realized is that when I started doing Ableton just for production and started doing Pro Tools just for mixing, those are actually very similar to the idea of putting yourself in different rooms, right? So it's like the idea of this is my music space, and when I need to do office work, I do it in a different area. Well, digitally, whenever I want to be creative and like be more of the songwriter, be more of the producer, I open Ableton. If I'm creating something from scratch, I'm opening Ableton. But if I'm getting work done in the editing space or in the mixing space, I'm printing stuff and moving to Pro Tools. And those are those are two very different mindsets just in themselves, producing versus mixing. I kind of think of those as a little more, producing is a little more creative, though there is a lot of creativity in mixing. And I think of mixing as a little more analytical, a little more fine tuning, whereas like there is some of that in production, but I find that, they each have there is a little offset, I will say, in like there's a little bit in both, but one definitely has more of the other than each other. So what I found is that being able to digitally say, okay, I'm moving over to this now, mentally, I'm not thinking about doing production while I'm in Pro Tools, and vice versa. I'm really not thinking about mixing while I'm in Ableton, though I have mixed in Ableton before. Like I think I've said it in a couple different episodes. It's definitely not my favorite, and it's definitely not the most intuitive for mixing. So that's why I kind of keep it in Pro Tools. It's a little more easy for me personally. To each their own, but that is something. So maybe you could try to do something similar, right? So let's say you really like Cubase for mixing or for production. I know Josh really likes, writing and producing in Cubase. So does Lee. For me, if I were in their shoes, I would try maybe producing in Cubase and then maybe moving to something like Pro Tools for editing and mixing. Or like I think Josh has started doing this, producing and songwriting basic ideas in Ableton to start. And then once he's kind of get that down, doing like more intensive work in Cubase. So it's like a mentality shift completely. And I think we'll have a conversation about running two DAWs eventually, whenever he's back on. So, and like, let's kind of double down on why we're talking about this first, right? Well, it prevents something called context switching. So what that means is whenever you're switch, I mean, you can kind of like infer it from the name, but whenever you're having to mentally switch from doing one task that is very different from another task, and you're going back and forth between those tasks, your brain has a hard time catching up with that. Like I said, context switching. You're switching different contexts. So if it's, for instance, if I'm on a sales call and then I'm having to go from a sales mindset over to maybe something more of like a marketing or a finance mindset, right? Those are pretty different. And especially in the world of business, those are very different. Mentally, it's going to take a second for me to get caught up on switching over to the other thing. So we can take that in terms of studio world and say, okay, I'm going to do production here. So that I'm confident that when I'm in this thing, like for me personally, when I'm in Ableton, I am doing production and I am focused on that. And then whenever it's time to move to Pro Tools, I let my context switch happen. And then it's not going back and forth. I'm saying I am now in Pro Tools. I am in editing, mixing, mastering mode. And I'm not having to go back and forth between those two things. And not only slow me down, but it uses more mental bandwidth and more mental effort on your brain. I can't even tell you how much it's helped me focus on staying on task on one of those things when I'm doing those things. And even like with the physical space as well, when I'm at my table in my dining room, I'm sitting and I'm not focused on creating. I'm focused on dealing with clients. I'm focused on sending emails. I'm focused on budgetary stuff. I'm focused on journaling or working on my calendar, scheduling, all that kind of things, working on my website. Like those are the kind of business things that I'm working on there. And then when I move in here, after I'm done with all that stuff, or whenever, I come in here, I'm leaving all of that stuff out there and focusing on the things that I have to do in here more creatively. So hope that number one helps you separate your workspaces. Think about some ways that you can do that. Think about some ways that you can physically remove yourself. And another kind of byproduct of it is because you work at home, this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but because you work at home, and especially if you have a family, because you work at home, you feel like sometimes you feel like you're not able to leave your work at work because your work is at your house. So like a lot of people that have a normal job, when they go to work, they feel like, especially if they're in like a regular office job, a normal 9 to 5 that doesn't necessarily have to bring any work home, you can go to your office, you can do your thing, you can leave it there to come back home, not have to worry about it, and you pick it up the next day. It's kind of hard for us when studio people, especially when our studios are in our house, to do that. So by doing some of these things, you're putting physical restraints on thinking about work when you're trying to relax, and thinking about work when you're being with your family. This puts a physical restraint on those things, and it allows you to do things like come home, turn off, helps you with the turn. I have a really hard problem with turning off my brain sometimes when it comes to work. And this has definitely been a huge help, because I know that if my door's closed and my studio lights are off, like I'm not working. I am in there on the couch with my family, hanging out. So that's been honestly, a huge bonus for me. Number two, kind of a shorter one than, separating your workspaces. Number two is journaling. This is something that I've started doing this year a lot more. I used to do it some. I kind of stopped. I don't even remember why. I think I just stopped, but I remember really liking it. And then I've heard a couple people talking about it from the standpoint of just like trying to clear your head, kind of similar to if you've ever done meditation for a really extended period of time, which I've also done some of in extended periods of time. It's kind of a way to almost, if you've ever done meditation, you'll understand what I mean, but it's very similar to that in the sense of clearing your mind, or kind of dumping all of your thoughts out onto somewhere, right? Instead of letting everything just kind of sit up here and jangle around and kind of get in the way of you being able to focus, thinking of, oh, I got to do this today. Oh, maybe I should call this person. Oh, my mom texted me. I should probably return that. I need to make sure I do this thing tonight, or this thing is happening next week, and it's also on my mind now. You don't have to worry about that. You can get all of that out of your head onto a page, whether digitally or physically. I do mine digitally. I use an app called Notion. If you've ever heard of that, it's big in the. I've actually, the guys that I talked about at the top, Thomas Frank and Ali Abdaal, really love Notion. They use it a lot. They use it for more productive things in terms of teamwork things, which I've also kind of dabbled in a little bit. It's super complicated, but it also doesn't have to be. It can be as simple as just taking notes, or as simple as just writing some stuff down. I have started using it for my journal because they make an iPad app for my iPad. So in the morning, and they also make it for your computer if you want to use that. I believe they make it for your phone as well, but I just don't even want it on my phone right now. But you can put it on something like your iPad or your laptop. I, in the morning, have started sitting, like I said, at my my dining room table, in my kitchen, and I'll sit down and I'll make my cup of coffee in the morning. I'll sit down and I'll start journaling, and I just get everything out of my head. Anything I'm thinking of, I'm typing it out. Anything, all those nagging thoughts, just trying to get it onto that page and out of my head. And what it allows me to do is not only, if they're negative, read them back and realize how dumb they are, or if it's something that's really nagging at me, I can confront it on a page head on, and maybe even come to some sort of solution or conclusion with those things. So like from a mental health perspective, it is also extremely helpful. But on top of that, it lets you, like I said, clear your mind, get everything out, start your day focused. And then you actually go on to number 3, which is a daily highlight. So at the end of your journal, you've processed your day, you processed all your thoughts, whatever. You've gotten it all out. Now you're going to your daily highlight. Now I do this both digitally and physically, and I recommend grabbing something like this. If you can see that, there you go. It's just a numbered Post-it note. You just grab that and a pen, and once I'm done in my journal, I get everything written out, all nice and brain dumped. And then once I'm thinking clearly, I kind of type at the bottom daily highlight. And then I pick the one thing that I feel like I need to get done today. And I think science has said if you can get one thing done every single day, you will be one of the most productive people on the planet. If you can just get one thing done. It is wild, honestly, how effective it's been for me. If I can get one thing done every single day, I do feel like I can take on pretty much any project. It's been really cool. So what I do is I take a pen after I've typed out my daily highlight, kind of thought through some things that I feel like I really need to get taken care of. I write down one thing on the top, and that is the only thing that I write down. Write down one thing, and then it prevents me from focusing on a bunch of stuff, making a huge list of 10 items and being like, okay, all 10 of these, I got to take care of everything today. This is kind of hard to do all of the stuff that you want to do, but it's really, really simple to focus on one thing at a time. It's the idea of taking everything one step at a time, one task list at a time. So you're using a daily highlight to write one thing. You're focusing on that one thing, and then you've knocked that thing out. You finish that task. What then? All right. So now that you finished the task, you can either choose to write a second task and knock that thing out. Or if that one task took the majority of the day and you don't feel like you really have enough time to do another thing, give yourself permission to just be done. Finish early. It's cool. Like, you can do that. Take some time for yourself. And honestly, for audio people like engineers and producers, it's actually really, really beneficial for us to give our ears breaks. And we tend to try to push past our limitations on our ears. And sometimes it ends up really damaging our hearing, which are the money makers for what we do. So it is really helpful for us to go actually take time to take a break and give our ears some rest and come back fresh tomorrow. Say you've worked on this mix the whole time and it's 15 till and you feel like you've come to a good place with it. Cool. Print it, put it in your Dropbox or your file pass or whatever you're going to put it in, and just let it be there and just shut everything down and walk away and finish 15 minutes early. Like, that's okay. It is, like I said, it's great for your ears, and it's also really good for your brain to just kind of let it calm down, let it exist, not make it have to think for extended periods of time, and just give yourself, like I said, give yourself a break. Like, it's okay. It's fine. You can take a break. It's okay. So recapping before we do our last one, which is kind of a simple one. But number 1, separate your workspaces. Number 2, journaling. And then at the end of our journal, we're going to go to number 3 and use that daily highlight. Write it down on that pen and paper so we can physically mark it off whenever we're done with it and continue to write another one. And then for our last one, we're going to use what's called a focus mode. And this is on specifically for people that are on iPhones. I don't know if Androids have anything like this. I'm pretty sure they do, but I don't have an Android, so I'm just going to kind of talk to my iPhone people right now. I actually have a focus mode on right now between the hours of 5 and 8 for family time, and I have another focus mode on that I can trigger on and off whenever it's time to do studio time. I don't have it set to a specific time. I can just say, okay, time to work, hit my work focus mode. And you might be asking, well, what does this do? If you don't know, they made an update to iOS recently so that you can set up essentially do not disturb, but it's a bunch of different instances of do not disturb. So you have a personal, you can set if your personal focus mode is on, like mine is right now. You can set up who's allowed to call you. You can set up who's allowed to text you. You can set up what apps are going to have push notifications sent through to your phone. So now you're probably starting to think about, oh, well, how does this apply to work? Think about how this can apply in your work situation. You can set up a focus mode for work so that maybe you need your email, maybe you don't need your emails to come through because it's not email time. So you just don't put emails in that. You want your emergency contacts to be able to contact you? Cool. Give them access in your focus mode. It's in the settings tab under do not disturb or focus. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just double check that. But I believe it is under settings. And then it is under focus with a little moon symbol next to it. And then you have do not disturb, personal, sleep, and work. I use my sleep one too, which is really, really convenient. And do not disturb is just like a generic kill all if I just need a second to be perfectly quiet, honestly. So yes, I have my work one set up so that my wife and my emergency contacts, if I'm at work, like working, here or working somewhere else, can contact me, but nobody else can disrupt the flow that I'm in. And if my family gets a little bit out of hand, I might take them off. We'll see. But then I can also have notifications, which actually I have none on because I don't want to see any push notifications from anything. I don't, unless you're using something like WhatsApp or something like that to communicate with your family, I don't really know why you would need any other notifications, or unless you have another job and you're working remote and you need to be able to get any push notifications from a specific work related app. Like Slack is a pretty good example. You probably put Slack in there, or like we use an app at the coffee shop for like time stuff and for scheduling things there. So I can get some notifications from that if I needed to, but I have a specific time for that, so I don't really need to deal with that. But like I said, options are for you. I feel like using a focus mode is going to be really, really pivotal to, once you're in that space, you've brain dumped on your journal, you've found out that daily highlight that you need to do, you've separated your workspace so you're in your space, you're ready to go, you're in your creative space or your analytical editing, mixing space, whichever, and you're going. So most of the time phone calls will break that up for you. That's what this is for, is just to prevent your focus from getting broken, to prevent your focus from deterring off. Because I have a tendency also to, once I get a phone call, well, I realize I have to call like 4 other people, so might as well just do it now. And then 5 hours later, I've done no work. So this kind of helps prevent all that, and give you specific times to call people instead of getting deep in your work and then fully just getting distracted. So yeah, just to recap real quick, separate your workplaces. You can physically do that by having different rooms or different spaces in your single room, or going to like a place like a coffee shop to do business work. Digitally also separating, like I said, software, or like I do with Ableton and Pro Tools, to prevent context switching and to keep yourself focused on the task at hand while you're doing it. Number 2, journaling, getting all of those thoughts out of your head, getting your brain clear for the day, and leading into number 3, that daily highlight, that one thing, using that notepad or whatever numbered sticky note thing that I have, and then writing one down, knocking that thing out. And once you're done with that, marking it off physically, get that tactile, marking off of a task, and then either moving on to one singular task after that, or giving yourself the okay to take a break. And then number 4, using focus modes to, once you're in that focused, I don't even know what to call it. You're in that focused mode, I guess, so that you don't get distracted from things like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or TikTok notifications popping through and sending you down a rabbit hole that way, or phone calls or text messages coming in from people who will unwittingly distract you from you working on the thing that you need to knock out. Because like I said, sometimes we only have a specific amount of time to get this stuff done. Sometimes we are trying to optimize the hour or 2 hours that we have available to us, because, some of us are part-time, some of us are hobbyists, some of us are trying to just make the thing happen. We got to take advantage and make the most of the time that we have available to us. So let's do that with some of these things. I hope you enjoyed some of these tips. If there's any of these that really stuck out to you, feel free to hit me up at Music by Drew, or on Instagram or Twitter or any of those, or on the Home Studio Hangout page. I'll be posting something on the story to respond to, so that'll be at Home Studio Hangout. Thank you so much for listening. If you're a new listener or you haven't yet, feel free to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot. We super appreciate everybody that does that, and we super appreciate all of our listeners for listening. If you're new, like I said, give us a follow on Instagram. That's the main place we use, at Home Studio Hangout. And if you're only listening and you haven't checked us out on YouTube, we are on YouTube. It'll be in the link in the description of the Home Studio Hangout Instagram. kind of convoluted, or you can just go to homestudiohangout.com to see all the links, get places fast. Honestly, that's the easiest way to get anywhere. So once again, thank you for hanging out with me. I've been Andrew. I hope you guys have a productive week. Let's use some of these and make the most of our time. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.